So, a couple days before this movie has come out, we've seen a lot of 10 out of 10s and 9.5 out of 10s and sporadically some 7 and 8s, but mainly they've been high 9s or even 10s out of 10s for this film. They're not lying. Not at all. This movie is beautiful, gorgeous, glamorous, just everything you would have expected this movie to be, if not much, much more. As you know, in my film reviews, I keep them rather quite unstructured and very raw because I want you guys to get the best possible emotion. You're going to hear my straight up, honest, raw feelings about this movie. I'm going to keep certain things spoiler free and other things are just going to be spoiler. If you haven't seen the movie, don't watch the review. I even have spoilers in the title, so just don't do it unless you don't mind being spoiled. So I want to begin by saying that this film is nothing short of a masterpiece. The cinematography in this movie, and I know I raved a lot about it before the movie actually came out, but I said that it had the potential of being one of the prettiest comic book films of all time through the lens, and it is. Anything from a car chase scene to a Batman fight scene to a simple landscape of Gotham City, it does it with such intrigue and such emotion that you immediately feel connected to this world. Matt Reeves, we've seen his work, especially on the Planet of the Apes series. I think Matt Reeves has already entered himself in one of the greats for this generation when it comes to cinematography. There is a lot of film work in this movie that does remind me of a Blade Runner or a Tenet or a Zodiac or a Seven, which is frankly what this movie is. This movie is like Seven and Zodiac put together, and Batman just happens to find himself in the middle of it. And let's talk about Batman right now. Was Robert Pattinson good? That is one of the biggest questions everybody is coming into the film with. You know, it's not enough to sit here and say, you look good in the trailers, or it's promising in the trailers. It can be, but we'll never truly know how good it is going to be until we see it with our own eyes. So, was Robert Pattinson a good Batman? And the short answer is yes. The long answer is absolutely yes. The long answer is he was phenomenal. The film is essentially 90% Batman and 10% Bruce Wayne. I do say this in my videos a lot too. The thing we got to know about Batman is he doesn't want to be Bruce Wayne. In his opinion, Batman is who he is. Bruce Wayne is his alias, and you can tell that from Robert Pattinson's performance. There's scenes of Bruce where, you can tell he just spends all his time in the Batcave, doesn't go out for any sun, no fresh air. People don't often see him that much. He really is a recluse, and it's because he'd rather spend all of his time outside, but at night in a bat costume. He doesn't want to be Bruce Wayne. So I think that was a really good call in this movie, making him Batman as much as they possibly could without needing to dive into the Bruce Wayne story. The Dark Knight trilogy, as much as we love it and as much as it is about Batman, you could argue that that trilogy is about the journey of being a bat to a man, put very simply. It's about the man trying to find himself once again and who he really is. Whereas in this, I think it's time to rediscover who the Batman is. Why has he decided to strip away his own freedom to spend his entire waking moments trying to fight off crime and fight off criminals, murderers, injustices, you name it? And speaking of rediscovering Batman, let's talk about this guy's detective skills. This is probably the Batman with the best detective skills that we have ever seen in live action. They were really trying to give him the name of the world's greatest detective. His villain is going to be the Riddler. The Riddler as a villain is going to mentally challenge you. And what better villain to go up against to test your world's greatest detective skills? Even at the beginning of the movie, when Batman is trying to decipher this very complex, like hieroglyphic code from the Riddler, Alfred gets a hold of it and he starts trying to deduce it with the specific letters that he's been given. And once Bruce, or Batman, started to figure out how Alfred was doing it, he took it and solved it all on his own. There were things that Batman was doing in this film that we didn't honestly see quite often of in other versions of him. And detective work isn't always just, I cracked it. You're not gonna be Sherlock Holmes all the time. A lot of the times, detective work can be like grunt work. It can be tiring and repetitive. You gotta talk to people all the time. You gotta chase leads and follow clues and inquire, like, where were you at this time? How do you know this person? That's what we saw Batman doing in this movie. He was constantly following tracks and clues. He was constantly talking to people and interrogating people. He's only in year 2. Can he be as good as he potentially will be in the next 5 years? We do have to remember that the story revolving around this Batman is more of a beginner Batman. This is only his 2nd year in the game. And of course, 2 years in the game has given him plenty of enough experience, but not enough experience. There are a couple of times in this film where you see him fail at a couple of things. He gets hit quite often, whether it be bullets or punches, and sometimes it's really weird. You can't really tell if he likes to get hit, if he almost likes the sensation of feeling the pain. This Batman, I really would not be surprised if he kind of has this love of living on the edge and being in danger. I'm not really too sure, but regardless, he does get hit a lot. And if that is a mistake, those are some things he's going to have to clean up as his story moves on. That part when he escapes GCPD and he glides off the top in that really weird jumpsuit he had going on, that was a fail. He's clearly not used to that. He's not perfect yet. He still has a lot of growing up to do. He still has a lot to learn from who he is as Batman. But because this is still almost an origin story, he'll get there. But this Batman is indeed brutal. There are plenty of moments in this movie where you get a couple of action scenes with him and he's just letting loose. If you threaten him, if you stand in his way, he's gonna crack your face. He's going to break your face. You might actually have to spend the next couple of months in the hospital because you can't see or feel anything because of how many broken bones are in your body or your face. He's got a lot of pent-up aggression. He's very angry. He's very troubled. Let's just put it this way. When Robert Pattinson got the role of the Batman, he understood the assignment. He knew what needed to be done. How about Andy Serkis as Alfred? This is an Alfred who has clearly served time in some sort of military arms. He knows what Bruce puts himself through every night. Now, we actually don't see much of Alfred in the film, and I do kind of wish we did see a little bit more of him. And I do like Alfred, but mainly because I love Andy Serkis. He is a phenomenal actor. Now, of course, that will all change in the future. We will get to see Andy Serkis as Alfred a lot more. I'm not gonna lie though, when the Riddler targeted Bruce Wayne about halfway through the film and he sent that incendiary grenade to Wayne Tower, I at one moment thought that actually killed Alfred, but it's nice to see that that man is just made of goddamn rock because nothing's gonna be putting down this Alfred. You can already tell. Another great character you can't forget, Commissioner Gordon, and Jeffrey Wright, another great casting choice for this version of the Batman and Commissioner Gordon. And they had a very unique friendship relationship in this film. GCPD, they don't like Batman, but for some reason, Gordon has taken a liking to him over the past 2 years. They don't really like having the Batman around, but because Gordon likes him around, they allow it. They had a buddy cop system to them, almost as if they were the dark, very dark version of Starsky and Hutch. They were riding around together, fighting together, solving mysteries together, and I loved it. Usually we're so used to seeing Batman take the lead, which of course he has to, but in the sense of Batman will meet with Gordon, get the information he needs, he'll go off and handle the heavy stuff. Meanwhile, Gordon in the background will have to try and figure out something else he can do to help the Batman. In this one, though, Gordon was pretty much in the thick of it the entire time with Batman. And he wasn't Commissioner Gordon at this point. I think he's like a lieutenant or something like that. So I can't wait to see when he fully transitions into Commissioner. Colin Farrell as the Penguin. Holy crap. You can't even tell. There is so much prosthetics on him that it could literally be anyone. Regardless of who it is, though, Colin Farrell does an excellent job as Penguin. A very different take on the Penguin. He's more of a New Yorker, but he felt scummy. And in fact, this entire world feels scummy. It does feel dirty. And speaking of scummy and dirty, Gotham City. This is probably one of the most accurate representations I have ever seen of Gotham City anywhere. I would say my favorite representations of Gotham City is Gotham from the Batman Arkham Knight game, Gotham from the comic books, and now Gotham in this. There's a scene near the beginning of the film where Bruce is driving on this cobblestone road and he's kind of going on a bend, and it almost looks like he's in Gotham's version of Times Square. It just has that old school yet modern vibe to it. It feels like an old city. It still feels very industrial, but at the same time, it's still presenting you with the newest of the new technology. It's got massive digital boards on its buildings promoting products. You see people with brand new smartphones in their hands. You see these McLarens or Porsches on the road. Whatever Bruce Wayne is driving, it's going to be something like that. A good Gotham always presents you the idea that this city feels and kind of looks old. The more you look at it, it's actually very new. It almost has a steampunk vibe. I was immediately invested into the fact that, okay, this is Gotham City. The introduction of Selina Kyle, or Catwoman, was done really well too. She was working for the Iceberg Lounge, and she was clearly some sort of waitress or bartender when we first see her when Batman is interrogating Penguin in his office. But then a little later on, we do get to see that she also role plays in Iceberg Lounge in the more private area for Gotham's richest scumbags, kind of like a showgirl or maybe even a prostitute, which is very comic book accurate. You do get that very seductive vibe from this Catwoman, anywhere from the way she dresses, the way she acts, the way she looks at people, even the wigs she wears. You do get a very sexy Selina Kyle. This movie shares a ton of similarities to comic books like The Long Halloween. In that comic book, that is where it is first discovered that Selina Kyle believes she might be the illegitimate daughter of Carmine Falcone. As the story develops over the years, there's never definitive proof that she is. Well, in this movie, she is indeed the daughter of Carmine Falcone, and I do like that Matt Reeves ended up deciding we're gonna take that storyline from the comic book and just make it a little more definitive for her in the movie. Now we don't just get this sense of, all right, this is Selina Kyle with a very damaged past. But we also get this character development of Catwoman, knowing that you have to deal with the fact that your father was one of the biggest crime lords in Gotham City. And now, where do you go? You spent this entire movie getting to know Batman, to see the type of stuff Batman does. Do you follow in his vigilante anti-hero steps? Or do you go down the other road and be a cat burglar, thief, criminal? And another shout out to Matt Reeves very quickly for source material. This movie shares a lot of similarities and story points to The Long Halloween, Dark Victory, Batman Zero Year, Batman Earth 1, so many others. Bravo to Matt Reeves for literally taking comic book panels and finding a way to geniusly and beautifully execute them on screen. Now, how about the Riddler? The Riddler is a fantastic villain in this movie, but I do know that one complaint I have been seeing about him from a lot of other people is the fact that he's not in the movie enough. And I agree, I could have used a little bit more time on the Riddler. I maybe would have liked to see him a little bit more. But regardless of that, let me tell you why I personally loved this adaptation of him. He's always one step ahead of Batman. Batman would use his skills to uncover pieces and clues, and every time he did, it was a game for the Riddler in the sense where it was like, okay, good, you figured out this step. I already have the next step laid out for you. It's your turn to figure it out again. He is a forgotten person. He's been in an orphanage his entire life, an orphanage that was actually funded by the Wayne Foundation. He hates the government. He hates politics, and I mean, who doesn't nowadays? But he hates the corruption. Essentially, there was this program called Renewal that Bruce Wayne's father, Thomas, was going to employ when he was running for mayor before his eventual death. Renewal was essentially going to be this money program that was going to turn around Gotham City and change it for the better. But when he died, the funding of the Renewal program ended up getting split to different sections of Gotham, and the owners of this Renewal program all belonged to criminal and gang families or any of the greedy people inside of Gotham City's DA's office or political governments. That eventually ruined Gotham even more and drove Gotham into the pit of despair that it is. Because now we end up finding out in the film that Carmine Falcone does indeed own most of this Renewal Foundation. And no matter what mayor they have in power in Gotham, Carmine owns that mayor. So he's basically been mayor for the past 20 years. He can do whatever he wants in the city. And with all of that going on, Riddler makes a very interesting point how he's an orphan. But so is Batman. Bruce Wayne's an orphan as well. But everyone had eyes on the poor rich boy with no parents. Wealth-wise, well-being-wise, he was going to be fine. But nobody cared about the orphans who didn't have the name Wayne behind them. And that was, of course, insulting for the Riddler as he was growing up and, as he moved into an adulthood where he says that he's been ignored his entire life. And he makes a really interesting line when he has a face-to-face with Batman in Arkham Asylum where he says, I won't be ignored anymore. Like, essentially, I will be remembered. Everything I've been doing in this city is going to be remembered. Now, does he really care if people will remember him for being a bad person or a criminal or a villain? No, he just cares simply that people will know who he is. He is now getting even the slightest bit of recognition. He also tries to show to Batman that both of them try to work for justice and vengeance, but their means to an end are completely different from one another. Riddler claims that what he is doing is vengeance for the city, killing off these government officials and threatening and blackmailing to kill, murder, bomb, or destroy something or someone until he gets what he wants. Sure, he may be attacking the right people, he may be putting an end to the right people, but he's not doing it in ways that it should be done in. But I do think the idea of vengeance meant, in a way, different things for Batman and Riddler. It was also a great moment, too, when that Riddler goon at the end of the film claimed that he was vengeance. And when Batman heard that, it immediately made him change his viewpoint. Yes, he needs to be fearful and he needs to be dangerous to the underbelly of Gotham City, but for the people, for the citizens of Gotham, he almost needs to find a way to be a ray of hope. I also really quickly want to add to who the Riddler was in this film, and I do really like that he had his own live streaming service. Like, he had followers, people who were commenting under his videos and were loyal supporters of the Riddler. There's even that part around the last act of the film where on one of his live streams there are comments of how they helped him craft specific bombs, or how his followers were gathering guns and getting guns ready for the final battle. It's really, really interesting, but also very scary. That is how it could be done nowadays. I'm pretty sure there are cases of real life people who have done things like this and have gotten help and support over the internet through live streams and, live forums. And the Riddler doing something like that fits his persona so well in this more so modern age idea of who the Riddler would be. A lot more violent, a lot more scary, and a lot more threatening. I would go through all the story plots and details, but if I did, this video would never end, and I don't want to ruin literally everything for you. But it's very interesting how secretive this movie seems to be. There's even a point in the movie where the Riddler makes a video about the Waynes and how corrupt they are. And he talks about how the Waynes and the Arkhams are the founding families of Gotham City. There were even a lot of mentions in the film of almost like a higher power, where if people said anything, they'd end up getting killed, or their families would get hurt, or worse, killed themselves. And at the end of the day, this higher power could have been Carmine Falcone, but something about it all is making me think like the Court of Owls is a very big possibility. I do feel like this movie is hiding a couple of messages that the Court of Owls exists. But speaking of villains, it does seem as if the Joker has been confirmed. When the Riddler is in Arkham Asylum and his plan fails, his cell seems to be right next to another fellow who has a pretty interesting laugh and a very good way with words. The camera through the cell door does zoom into the face of this character. It was very blurry and hard to tell. His face seemed to be badly scarred, like something was really wrong with him, and maybe he hides it and covers it up by putting on clown makeup. It is indeed played by the actor Barry Keoghan, which everyone was thinking that's who it was going to be in the first place. I'm really excited to see what they are capable of doing with this character. Matt Reeves took every single goddamn character in this movie and made them great. I can only imagine what he could do with someone like the Joker, and he's gonna have free reign to play with the Joker. So bring it on. I want Batman 2 right now. This world is ever evolving. This could be another Dark Knight trilogy. Essentially, this movie in its own way was Batman Begins. This next Batman movie could be something special. It could be just as heavy as The Dark Knight. If it follows that same pattern, this was already an unbelievable start to a Batman series. I'm so hyped. I'm so in the moment. What a fantastic experience this film was. All right, it's time to get to the review, because if I don't get to the review, this video is never going to end, because I could talk about it all day. So like usual, let's pay our visit to IMDb and see what everyone else is saying. For user reviews, as of right now, this movie is sitting at an 8.8 out of 10. And for Metascore, this movie is sitting at a 72 out of 100. As for my rating, I am giving this movie a 10 out of 10. This movie in every way is a masterpiece. You can call me biased all you want because it is Batman, it's a Batman film, blah, blah, blah. But this movie did everything right. Matt Reeves came out and said, I want to make a murder mystery with Batman, but it's got to be dark, it's got to be gritty, it's got to even be scary, and he executed it. Not only did it capitalize on every piece of cinematography it did, not only was this muscle car version of the Batmobile awesome and sound awesome, not only was the action executed very well, there are so many things that this movie did phenomenally, but the most important thing is, I think this movie just captured Batman very well. This is something in Batman we've all wanted for a long time, whether or not we've noticed it, and that is the detective skills. And revisiting some of Batman's more mental strength other than physical strength was a very nice change, even though this Batman has plenty of physical strength. But the beauty about this movie is that it already started so good. How amazing is it going to be moving forward? But anyways, everyone, that is it for this movie review video. Please go check this movie out if you haven't yet. Go show it the love it deserves. Do whatever you gotta do to take 3 hours out of your day to watch this phenomenally executed film. But I'll just end it with this. The tagline of the movie is Unmask the Truth. And that is what everybody should be doing. Going to see this movie and unmasking the truth of how beautifully executed this movie actually was. Thank you, Matt Reeves, for giving us yet another amazing Batman movie and Batman story.